Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. And sorry we're getting started just a little late, but we are really happy to be talking today about growth versus scale. I know a lot of companies have set up some New Year's goals of growing their company in 2022. So we're going to be talking about what growth looks like for a company, how to identify growth streams, what's the difference between growth and scale, and just really get into our businesses in some real tangible takeaways today. So before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the SBDC. You're joining us today as part of our educational programming, but the Penn State SBDC is located on the Penn State University Park campus. We serve 4 counties, Mifflin, Clinton, Lycoming, and Center counties, but we're a network of 16 different centers throughout the state of Pennsylvania. And actually there's over 900 centers in the United States. So if you are joining us live on Facebook, you can definitely find a center close to you if you're not in Pennsylvania. But one of our expertise is offering no-cost confidential consulting to businesses who are looking to start, grow, or prosper their business. So that's something that interests you. Make sure you connect with the SBDC closest to you. As I said, we do that no-cost confidential consulting. You would be matched up with a business consultant such as myself and work with a consultant on your business throughout the longevity of your entrepreneurial journey. We also have training and informational type services that we offer, such as this event and other events. We do QuickBooks trainings and trainings just to help your business get started and grow. We also offer resources and referrals for small businesses. So with that being said, we're getting our extra panelists joining us here today. I'd like to invite my panelists on screen, and we'll go ahead and get started with this talk. As we move throughout the talk, I would invite any of the participants that are either watching us on Facebook or joining us in the actual Zoom. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, go ahead and drop those into the chat, and we will make sure that we address those as we're moving along. So thank you to our panelists for joining us. Elias, you're welcome to join us on camera now as well. And Mark's just getting connected to audio here, so we'll give him a second. So I want to start out and just kind of give you a bio of who we're talking with today, because we have some really fantastic panelists joining us today. So I'll start out by introducing John Sider. John is the director of Second Stage Capital for Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Central and Northern Pennsylvania. In his role, John Sider is responsible for assisting the center's portfolio companies in attracting additional investment capital from sources such as angel investors, institutional venture capital, banks, and government sources. Previously, he was managing director of statewide initiatives for Pennsylvania for Ben Franklin Centers. In this capacity, he played a central role in the conception, development, and passage of Pennsylvania's 2013 Innovate NPA legislation, which will provide $100 million in tax credits to fund continuum of capital formation activities in the state. From 2005 to 2010, Sider worked for the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, where he managed more than $400 million of venture capital and angel investor initiatives, and was ultimately appointed Deputy Secretary for Technology Investment by Governor Rendell in 2009. So as you can see, Sider is going to offer us a lot of information and expertise today. He also has been lending group leader at Community First Fund and a branch manager for 2 Fulton Bank branches in the city of Harrisburg. So Sider is a graduate of Wheaton College in Illinois, and he also has an MBA from Fox School of Business at Temple, and he lives in the city of Harrisburg with his wife and 2 children. Thank you, John, for joining us today. So we also have Mark and Elias joining us. Mark Ciravella is an associate professor of business administration at Pennsylvania College of Technology, where he teaches courses in small business management, entrepreneurship, and business planning and operations. He's a former small business owner and counseling with North Carolina's Small Business and Technology Development Center. He's published in a Journal of Business Venturing, Human Resource Management Journal, Journal of Business Ethics and Entrepreneurship, Theory and Practice. He received his BSBA from Shippensburg University, an MBA from University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and a PhD in business administration from University of Georgia. So thank you as well, Mark, for joining us. And then finally, our entrepreneur expert joining us today is Elias. Elias Janetis is the founder and CEO of Squeeze, which is a fintech company platform that enables consumers to make better buying decisions around their recurring household bills while protecting them from spam. We'll make sure you guys get a link to that as we're moving through the chat today. Squeeze is the first company to automate a perpetual shopping experience, allowing consumers to always get the best deal. Elias is also the active investor in over a dozen early stage technology companies through his investment vehicle, Abiding Ventures. Prior to Squeeze, Elias founded the disruptive healthcare technology company, Mobile Health. Mobile Health quickly became the service choice for hundreds of thousands of seniors. Mobile Health was acquired by a large private equity company in 2017. Elias holds several communication patents. He was, in 2006, he worked with the SBDC and Ben Franklin Technology Partners. He was a grand prize winner of their Big Idea contest. Mobile Health has been the 2012, 2014, and 2018 Frost Sullivan Award winner. In 2014 and 2015, it was an Inc. 500 Award winner. In 2014, Grow Florida Growth Award and Company to Watch. So Mobile Health was also number 90 on Deloitte's Fast 500 and 500 fastest growing technology companies in America. Elias has served community boards in the Georgia Snow Scholarship Fund, Be Strong Global, the National Christian Foundation of Palm Beach, and the Place of Hope. When not building companies and making ideas, Elias enjoys traveling with his family, croquet, golf, fly fishing, reading, mentoring people in personal finance. So Elias actually grew up in Pennsylvania where he attended Bucknell University, but he now lives in Boca Raton, Florida. He was just asking us about the weather here in Pennsylvania before he got on, and he was not impressed with our ice storm we're actually having today. So thank you to our panelists and thank you to our audience. You can see that we have some extensive expertise on the panel today. So we're going to get started by just chatting a little bit about the most common distinction between growth and scale. So let's start out with growth. And since we know every small business right now is looking for growth, in general, we think growth is kind of linear in terms. A company adds new resources like capital, people, or technology, and its revenue increases as a result. So by contrast, when we're looking at scale for just the purposes of this talk, scaling is when income increases without substantial resources. So growth is where your income is going to increase, but you're going to have substantial cost increase with that. And for scaling, we're going to talk about how scaling a revenue stream would you would see that income increase, but not have as many substantial resources needed. So I'm going to start with John here, since you also work with consulting with businesses. In your terms, how would you define business growth?
Yeah, so first, Elizabeth, thanks so much for inviting me. I always be characterized as an expert because I feel like there's more I don't know every day. That body is growing faster than what I feel I do know. And I am not an entrepreneur. I have enormous respect for entrepreneurs, and those are the real experts. But I can certainly share kind of what I've observed from the financing perspective of these companies. The first thought is that growth is an imperative for any business. And if you are not growing, then something is wrong. And I think what we're talking today is about business models that can support growth versus supporting scale. And I think scale is what I learned as operating leverage from a financial perspective, which is when you get to the point in a business where your additional revenue is essentially dropping to the bottom line, and that you have a cost model, a cost structure that is not growing as fast as your revenue is. And that is a wonderful place to be. It's also very difficult, and it is not a scalable business model is not achievable by every kind of business, because some businesses will have to continue to invest in capital expenditures like equipment and their sales and marketing teams, and those will be growing in a similar ratio to their revenue growth. But scale is that wonderful thing where, you're really starting to churn net income. And I think the main things that achieve that is standardization and automation of processes. And the classic scalable business model is software as a service, because you invest significantly in creating a piece of software, and you certainly have to continue to invest in its upkeep and maintenance. But every additional customer that buys that software, you're pretty much getting a really healthy margin on that. I heard this morning General Motors executive Mary Barra talk about their scaling up for EVs. And one of the things she was really talking about is the standardization of their battery platform that's going to allow them to do that quickly. They're creating a battery platform called, I believe it's Ultimatum or something like that. And that's going to go across all of their model lines as the powertrain. So that was a reminder of one of the key pieces in being able to scale a business is to standardize what goes into it. That I'll let the real experts talk.
No, thank you, Mark. I think that's a great way to kind of define the difference between the two. And I love that you point out that businesses should be looking for growth. That's how you show the success of your business. So I was going to ask Elias here. I mean, you've grown businesses, I believe, probably scaled as well pretty significantly. Are there growing pains with growing businesses?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you for inviting me, Mark, for thinking about me, and to all of my fellow Pennsylvanians. Even though I've been in Florida 15 years, I still consider myself a PA guy. And my parents are still up in northern central PA. And, I try to visit every summer, certainly not this time of the year. Yeah, I mean, in fact, if you grow too much, you could actually ruin your business. In fact, growing too much growth, a lot of times can cause enormous capital constraints, and as well as strains inside the operational aspects of the business. So as an example, I do a lot of early stage investing, and I just recently bought a position in a private sales training organization where they're developing a tech stack to automate some of the sales training. They've gone from 0 revenue to last month, they did about 600,000 in revenue within 2 years, right? So you have that enormous amount of scale, you have that enormous amount of growth, and it's like, you want to just high five each other. But when we kind of had our board meeting and we started kind of digging in, customers are, maybe churning out a little bit faster because they feel like they're not getting the attention that they've been expecting. And so you have to really think about, growing your business. And certainly as John mentioned, if you can automate as much of those business processes by leveraging software, and it's a great time to be an entrepreneur, right? So I'm 47. The first company that I started when I was 23 years old, I had to scrape up $20,000 for a PBX phone system, right? I mean, nobody pays for phone systems anymore. I mean, there's so many expenses that I had to have as an entrepreneur that today people don't have to have those same types of startup infrastructure costs. But yeah, absolutely, there can be, pains. So some of those pains can be, capital constraints. So let's say you're growing a lot, and now you're having inventory issues, and now you have to start outlaying. You have maybe your widgets made in Asia, and there's delivery issues, and now you got to think about, well, how do I finance that delivery? And so that's where having either a quality investor base or relationships with your business banker to help you potentially finance that. But, you know, if there's some of the problems is when you're growing a business, you know, you might be making money on an adjusted EBITDA basis, but when you look at with the growth of the business is losing money. So then it's really difficult to get financing for that business outside of venture capital and institutional money. So yeah, absolutely. Growing high growth could lead to service delivery issues with your customers, making them not happy. It can, as you know, right now, a lot of companies are understaffed, right? You have, you know, the great, you know, what I call great resignation right now. So as you're growing your company, and it's really difficult for you to attract the human capital to properly execute on your business, that can be a challenge. It can be a challenge in the financing side. It could be a challenge in the delivery side. And then even if your business model is more advertising based, right? If you don't have the right infrastructure in place to be able to measure the quality of your campaigns and your advertising spend to see where they're maxing out on their efficiencies, you know, you can be spending a lot of money and kind of just burning a lot of capital that's precious to a startup or a company that's in the early stages or not necessarily well funded.
Yeah, I definitely, from my own experience too, I'm a business owner as well. And I early on thought growth meant increasing all these resources, you know, hiring a bunch of employees. And that's how we were going to measure that we were getting bigger. And I definitely think you made some great points along the, you know, all the different inputs that need to grow along with the business. So Mark, I was going to ask you about competition. So when we're looking to grow, how important is it to know what your competition is doing?
Thanks for asking me. Also, just like you, so thank you for having me. I'm sorry for the technical issues I had getting started. Glad to be here. So when you're looking at the competition, you really have to think about.
Mark, we're having a hard time. Can you guys hear him okay? Other
No.
panelists? No, having a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah,
Better.
that's better.
Okay. Let me try something else.
Yep, much better.
Now you're muted.
And he's frozen.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Can't hear you.
Jeez.
I think you're good there.
Can you hear me?
It's a little quiet.
So I'm trying to use a microphone. I'm having technical issues. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm not used to using Zoom.
Yeah, no problem.
But can you hear me?
Barely.
Could you move the microphone a little bit closer, maybe?
Yeah, I can really bad. How's this?
Great.
Now you can hear me. All right. Sorry about this. So what was the question again? Oh, no, again, competition. So when you're looking at competition, you really want to think about, you know, what are the key success factors in the industry? And you really have to define from your customer's point of view, what they value when they're doing business with you. And so what they value really defines those key success factors that your customers are looking for. And those key success factors provide value to your customers, and your customers are always going to go to the place of business that provides the most value to them. So thinking about the competition, you have to compare your key success factors, those key success factors in terms of what you provide, to the key success factors that your competitors provide. And it's one of the problems we have with entrepreneurs, and I'm going to kind of go back to the growth model as well. One of the problems that we have with most entrepreneurs is they tend to be too optimistic, tend to look at their own position as superior to others, and they aren't really realistic about their own position. So when you look at those key success factors and how the competitors are doing, you really have to do it with kind of sober eyes. You have to make sure that you are being realistic as far as how your competitors are doing. That might mean talking to customers. That might mean going on social media and finding reviews about your customers or about your competitors. But don't just, you know, go through the analysis and think, oh, we're better than our competitors. You know, we're better in this key success factor. We're better in that key success factor. When that's not the reality. You have to be truthful in your analysis. And I also kind of want to go back to the idea of growth. You know, we typically associate growth with new locations and a business growing from one location to 2 locations to 3 locations. That's not necessarily the case, but we also have to take it from the point of view, again, of the mindset of the entrepreneur, because we know that from SBA data, we know that 81% of all business owners have 0 employees. And the vast majority of those business owners have no intention of adding employees. They want to grow their revenues, but they don't really want to grow their infrastructure. So it's the kinds of companies that Eli started that we really want to focus on in terms of helping them grow. The entrepreneurs who understand what it's going to take, because Eli's situation, I think, is really unique. If you talk to him about his early beginnings, and I know from our discussions in the early beginnings of his company, he knew where his strengths were, he knew where his weaknesses were. He was willing to get other people involved in his team to get that business off the ground. He had the mindset that we are going to be a national brand, and he grew it into a national brand. Most business owners, most entrepreneurs, though, just have the idea, I'm going to start a business, and I hope it creates a lifestyle that I'm happy with. And we call those entrepreneurs lifestyle entrepreneurs. Once they get to that point where they're happy with their lifestyle, they don't grow anymore. So we really want to try to support the types of businesses that Eli started and that he's helping to start. Those types of gazelles that really contribute to the employment in our economy. And of course, when you're going to be doing that, you have to pay attention to what your competition is doing. I can tell you, Eli knew exactly what his competition was doing. And the other thing is, he brought a world of experience into the startup that he created with mobile health. You know, he was doing that business before he started mobile health. He understood the gaps of what the customers weren't getting and what they needed. And so he went out there and found a way to provide those to beat the competition. See what the gaps are, see what the competition isn't satisfying as far as the competitors, and what you can satisfy for the competitors to provide value to them.
Yeah, and if I can chime in there, Elizabeth, you know, it really depends on what your business model is and what you're selling. You know, very few companies are going out there with a very few entrepreneurs are going out there with a very unique business model or a very unique widget that's exclusive to them. A lot of times you're offering a competitive service, and there might be 50 companies that do exactly like you do, you know, throughout the country. So that's when really having a good sales script, clearly understanding, you know, the strengths and weaknesses of your own organization, and really having, you know, a quality sales pitch that's much more consultative, trying to understand, you know, when you're pitching that customer, what's important to them. Is it price only, or is it service, or is it quality? So, you know, a lot of times, you know, entrepreneurs, small businesses, they make the mistake of all of a sudden trying to like win by lower price, because they might have less overhead than, say, a larger company. But then again, that less margin typically becomes an impediment for them to be able to scale and properly deliver that service as well. So you got to really be cognitive of, you know, what are you offering? What's your strengths and weaknesses? And then most importantly, you know, how do you find the right fit with the customer? And instead of going in there and kind of jamming down their throat, trying to sell them, establishing a connection with them, and then doing more of a consultative sales process. Understand, you know, are they completely, utterly happy with their current provider? If they are, you know, don't spend all your time trying to convince them to go to you. Hang up the phone, and there's probably a million other people for you to pick up and try to reach out to. So, you know, understanding, you know, what, not just the competitive matrix, but also what you can really deliver. And then if you approach it on a more of a consultative basis, you're going to have a much better chance of having that right fit, because it's not just about getting a customer, it's also about retaining them as well, and really understanding what their needs are and being able to make sure that you can deliver expectations. You know, the key to happiness, I believe, is, and whether it's relationships, business, whatever, it's managing expectations. So don't go over there, overpromise, price something that at the end of the day, you can't really deliver quality on, or, you know, too many entrepreneurs are pricing their businesses just to create busyness for themselves, but they're not making any money. They're just creating busyness. And I don't want to be busy. I want to make money. And I want to be busy making money, but I don't want to be busy just for the sake of being busy.
I really like how you touched on the customer and knowing the customer. I work with another a marketing professor on campus who says, you know, you don't have to make everybody your customer. If you have a bad customer, give them to your competition and move on. So I like that idea. And I don't know if any of you have thoughts about how customers have changed during the pandemic and how what we can do to address those changes to help lead towards growth. Anybody have any thoughts on customers?
Elizabeth, just one thought about competition, and then we can give you a couple of things on the customers. One of the things that we talk to our clients a lot about is the idea also of substitution, not just understanding your competition. I know, no doubt, Eli sees a lot of pitch decks in his role as an angel investor, and when you get to the competition slide, inevitably there's a matrix where the product or service that's being pitched is so far superior to the competition. And so there's an element of thinking that there is no direct competition. We are so unique. One of the things that we try to get people to think about is, what can your product be substituted for? And is it being substituted now? For instance, we hear a lot with folks that have enterprise software, customers right now are using Excel spreadsheets to manage this process or something like that. And there is kind of this idea that it's self-evident that they will switch because there's so many more features in their product. But what we just want to make sure people think about is that those folks might be really comfortable using Excel spreadsheets. And as Eli and Mark point out, you're going to have a sales process that makes folks comfortable switching, and that switch can be really, really difficult. So, just like you can substitute a ham sandwich for a steak, it's not the same thing, but they both feed you and get it done. And you need to make sure that your product, you've thought through what the switching pain is going to be, because there's no doubt you may be a unique product or service, but right now, someone is probably substituting that for something. So just a thought.
Yeah, that's a great thought, John. Especially with people that have a new idea, and I know this is more about maybe growing and scaling companies, but a lot of times I have, people pitch me ideas and they're looking at building ideas, and I say, that's a really great feature, that idea, but it's not a company, it's not a business, it's a feature. And also, it's really important when you're trying to develop something new, you can go around and ask 100 people what they think of your idea, and they might be like, hey, that's a great idea. But then you learn, and I've learned all these lessons myself through the School of Hard Knocks, is that sometimes people like something, but then the question is, are they willing to pay for it? So you could say, hey, what about something like this? And they'd say, oh, that's really good. And then, well, would you pay for that? No, but I think it's a really great idea. So, trying to come up with, ideas that are also relevant, and that can make money. And then obviously the switching costs. One of my companies that I invested in got acquired by Workday. I was the first investor in enterprise, a software company. And for the first year, it was really challenging to get enterprise companies to use their software, right? Because they had to, they weren't exactly sure who to sell into the organization. And then you had all the security protocols. And then, they used, it's kind of funny you said Excel spreadsheets. People used Excel spreadsheets for what they're doing, and getting organizations to change and switch their business model and being able to educate them that, something that they weren't paying for, now they should pay for it because it's going to create XYZ efficiencies, and getting that buy-in. And then also understanding the sell lead cycle, right? So if you're maybe have a SaaS company and it's a large CapEx to get it integrated, well, you have to figure out your own runway. How long is it going to take us to get a paying customer? How much capital do we need? before we can get our products installed. And you might pitch somebody in March and they say, this is fantastic, but our budget's already set for the year. So maybe come back and talk to me in November. We'll try to get you on the books for next year. Well, that's great, but also kind of discouraging at the same time. So understanding, like, inside your business, what are the lead cycles, sell cycles are really important.
I think that ties into, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I just want to kind of add on to that. I want to add on to what John said about having substitutes. And when you're thinking about your competitors and what your customers really want, if you are doing something that is making money, your competitors are paying attention to that, and they are going to not only potentially try to substitute, they're going to try to imitate it. So instead of providing a ham sandwich for a steak, they're going to also try to provide that steak exactly like you do. So if you think in your business you have some sort of trade secret or something like that that's giving you exclusivity as far as your customers go, you can bet that if it's making you money, your competitors are going to be trying to basically reverse engineer that trade secret and find out what it is. I mean, if you have a restaurant, you think you have some sort of special sauce on your steak, just like McDonald's, people are going to probably soon realize it's just Thousand Island dressing, and they're going to be able to just basically imitate that and provide exactly what you're doing and take your customers away. So you definitely have to watch out for that, but certainly understand what it is that's driving the customers in your business as far as how you're providing value. And kind of going back to what Elias was just saying in terms of the features, you really want to see provide what the benefits are to your customers. Determine what benefits they're looking for, and we have to think about psychological benefits as well as functional benefits. The psychological benefits, what it does for me, how it makes me feel, those are most often more important than the functional benefits. So just depending on what you're selling, but a lot of times they're more important than the functional benefits.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That's a good point. One of my favorite things to tell my clients early consulting is, let's figure out what your competition is doing and then just do it better, right? So definitely we can learn a lot by looking at our competition. I want to shift gears a little bit because we're getting some kind of questions around financing and financing for growth. And it kind of brings up this idea of how comfortable are you with the risk? So John, I know you work a lot with financing, and Elias, and I was just wondering, do you need to finance your business or take out loans or find investors in order to grow? Is that something like it goes hand in hand? What are your thoughts and ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, between my last two companies, raised over $40 million from outside capital, as well as, in my last company had a $35 million credit line from a commercial bank. And I've been through the whole gamut, right? Starting my first company with $3,000, as maybe, a lot of your listeners. And I grew up in Northern Central PA, right? So I understand the limitations of capital and potential perceived opportunity. And so I think that, I don't want to kind of ramble on. I feel like I might be missing to answer your specific question. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see a lot, specifically me as a consultant too, is that businesses want to grow, but they don't necessarily have the capital to do it. And then they get uncomfortable with the risks that it might take, that they're taking on by.
There absolutely is a correlation between, if you're in the wrong business, if you don't want to take risk and you want to be an entrepreneur, that's like saying, I'm afraid of heights and I want to be a skydiver. Like you can't be a successful entrepreneur and grow and scale a business without taking an enormous amount of risk, whether that's personal risk, financial risk. The company that I ended up, selling for, well over $100 million, during that journey, I sold my house, my previous company. I mean, I went all in, and I kind of use this analogy. If you've ever had bacon and eggs for breakfast, the hen contributed, but the pig was committed, and you got to be all in. And if you're not, chances are you're not going to build anything special. And I got down to $32 in the bank building that company and ran out of money 13 times. And then, finally got the product to launch. And you know what? It went gangbusters. I mean, we had 2,300% year-over-year growth for 5 years, hit the Inc. 500 twice. And, I had a million times where I should have quit. But it's like, what are you building? Do you believe in it? Does the market need it? Persistence and determination and risk are absolutely the critical components of becoming an entrepreneur. You clearly got to be smart. You got to be able to surround yourself with smart executors. But you have to, if you're not willing to take risk and personal financial risk, then, go get a job, or you're probably more likely going to build a business that you've created your own job, but you're not going to, then you should think about taking whatever parts of your profits and investing in Vanguard index funds, because you're probably not going to have a company that is going to be worth a whole lot in the future. And that's okay, right? Not everybody's going to be Elon Musk. But it depends on, what do you want to build? And, the larger the opportunity, the larger the idea, the more you're going to have to get out on the risk spectrum. And unfortunately, if you're of a person of limited means, it's going to be really challenging, because most entrepreneurs raise their capital through friends, family, and fools, on their first go around. And if you don't have a financial network, you have to be incredibly bright or have an idea that's very, very compelling and really understand and be able to communicate that value creation to investors. Very few people do real angel investing like I do. I mean, out of my portfolio company, out of those, 15 early stage companies that I invested in, or I am an investor in, I would say 12 out of those 15, I was first money in, right? So I'm very comfortable from the very large risk taking, but you typically have to find other high net worth investors or entrepreneurs. Chances are, if it's your first company, unless you graduated from Stanford or MIT and were an ex-Googler, nobody's going to come in and give you $5 million on your idea. So, you're going to have to really think about, the milestones. And I mentor so many entrepreneurs. People come to me, I think I need $3 million to do this idea. And I say, well, listen, you don't need 3 million today. What do we need today? Where are we at today? And if you think about building your business in series of small milestones and tranches, and it's like, maybe you need $100,000 for that first proof of concept. And then, it might take you a lot of conversations to raise 100 grand, but chances are, if you get in front of enough people, you can raise that money through business plan competitions. I won $25,000 from, the SBDC Big Idea Contest. And that honestly was the first outside capital that my company Mobile Help received outside of my own, right? And so, I really needed that $25,000. It allowed me to make progress on my prototype. So, let's say you need a business that you need a couple $1 million, you got a startup idea, a tech idea, you got to really break it down into tranches. How much can you contribute? I don't ever invest in an entrepreneur that's working part-time on their idea, because it's so hard to be a successful entrepreneur if you're working 80 hours a week. If you've got 10, 15 hours a week to put towards your idea, your chances are nobody's going to invest in you, because you got to take that risk yourself. And part of that is, having a plan. My uncle was a very successful entrepreneur. And he said, hey, Elias, I spent 5 years just hoarding cash to build a financial base so I could make my first move and starting my first business. And so really understanding, you can't get frustrated by the process, but there is a process, and you got to be able to focus full time on it. You got to really have an awareness of your strengths and weaknesses. There's so many great people out there that you can network with in LinkedIn that are experts in the fields that you want to do. And you can ask them to first come and be mentors. to sit on your board, to be advisors. And you know what, once they get kind of that, they get to know you. You know, the worst thing to do is just pitch somebody to invest in your business without knowing them. You want to bring them in to dream together with you, to ask their advice. And you know what, when somebody recognizes a good idea, they'll offer you money, or say, hey, well, what do you need? Or you would say, hey, you know, Mark, I've got this idea. Do you know anybody that might be interested, you know, in this idea? But you don't ask them to invest in this idea, but you don't ask them that right off the bat. You first ask them about their idea, and you ask them about their experience, and you build rapport, relationship. You know, a lot of people go around fundraising the wrong way. They just go out there with a pitch deck and it's like, give me money. And if you say no, that's it. They close up and they want to go off to the next person. And so a lot of times it's really important to make sure that you're building rapport, you're bringing in the right advisors, talent, and really breaking down your business plan into small milestones. Because if you raise that 100 grand and you get to the next phase, you know what, now what have you done? You've built a little bit of credibility, and you can continue to build on that credibility. And if somebody said, hey, if you can go to the next group of people and say, listen, 6 months ago, I just had an idea and this business plan, and now I've got this proof of concept. And then this is the next step that we're going. And here's the value that's going to be created. And here's the need for what I'm building. And if you get them to dream together with you, you can build that credibility of raising even some more money. And it's going to be difficult. I mean, for my company, Mobile Help, I spent 18 months looking for an investor before I can find an investor. I moved to Florida for family reasons, and I had no network down here. I had no network. People didn't know who I was. And it was also during the financial collapse. So it was a really challenging time to raise money. But you know what? I didn't quit. And I brought in, you know, I eventually networked with really smart people that agreed with the premise of what I was building. And, you know, through persistence and determination, eventually opened up their checkbooks too. Sorry, that was long, but.
No, I think it's a good point. I mean, at the SBDC, we work with, you know, businesses with new ideas. And I think, you know, oftentimes they're not 100% committed. And so I think that they're kind of like, I'm going to do it on the side until I figure out. And I think it's a great point to point out that, you know, you have to be all in, you have to be comfortable with some of that risk. And there are lifestyle businesses that you can do, but they're not going to be big growth or scale type businesses. So we haven't touched on scale yet, and I want to kind of switch topics a little bit. So Mark or John, when a business owner comes to me and says, I want to scale my business, I often think that's kind of like the wrong term being used. But how would you kind of define a scalable business, or even just a scalable revenue stream?
Well, so I'll just be brief here, and Mark can jump in. So from the investor perspective, they are going to have a hard time backing a business, particularly if you're looking for equity type investments, venture capital, things like that, if you can't communicate your unit economics. And those will point to whether you're a scalable business. And what I mean by that, the most popular analysis that's done by investors under unit economics is the lifetime value of your customers divided by your customer acquisition cost. So that's LTV over CAC. And you're going to hear that from investors all the time. And they're going to ask, do you have that ratio? Do you understand it? And has your current market traction provided evidence for what those numbers are? We have a company right now that is going to be raising a Series A venture capital round probably in the next 6 months. They have an excellent product in the market. They're getting really good data on what their customer acquisition costs are, and they have really good data on what the lifetime value of the company is. So they're going to have a really good way to communicate that their business model is scalable because their lifetime value of their customer is a multiple of their customer acquisition costs. And so therefore, their business model is scalable. before you can communicate those sorts of things to an investor, I don't think someone is ready to scale their business. That would be my comment.
I agree with everything that John said. Thanks for also bringing up the lifetime value and customer acquisition costs, because I talk about that in class, and so it's a very important topic to try to get across to the future entrepreneurs as well. But as far as scaling up, just kind of thinking about, instead of adding, for every dollar that you had in expenses of your business or new equipment or hiring a new employee and only getting $1 out of that, for every dollar that you spend on those things, you want to get $10, $50 out of that. And so when I think about scaling it up, I mean, kind of going back to what Eli said a few minutes ago about the tranches type thing, don't go all in and say, I need $3 million when $200,000 can get you to the point where you're able to kind of test the market and see how it's going to go, and then determine if it's taking off, and then you take another couple $100,000, add it in, and then you make sure that a couple $100,000 then provides you $1 million worth of return, and then add another and another, and try to grow that way. So sometimes, too many business owners, they don't really look at their expenses the way they should. Anytime that you add an expense to your business, you have to think about, what do I need to generate in revenues to be able to pay for this expense? So if you hire an employee at $25 an hour, a full-time employee, over the course of the year, that's $50,000. You add in benefits, you might, actually it's over 50,000, you might be close to $60,000 with benefits and everything. And if you think, I just need to add $60,000 to my revenues to be able to pay for that employee, you're going to go out of business. Because you need to think about, what is my gross profit margin? Because if my gross profit margin, let's say I'm a retail store, my gross profit margin is only 33%, that's $60,000 employee. I need to generate $180,000 in sales to be able to pay for that $60,000 employee. So you need to really think about the top line. And if you are going to be scaling up, try to do it in small segments, and see how the market reacts to that, and then commit as you are starting to see those revenue streams really come in. Okay. So again, kind of going back to that employee example, if you start adding expenses and don't figure out what the top line costs, top line generation. So if that employee can't generate $180,000 in sales to cover his or her basically cost to you, then that employee better free up your time to be able to generate $180,000 in sales to be able to pay for that employee. So anytime you add an expense, think about what the true cost of that expense is going to be in terms of revenues.
Well, thank you, Mark and John. I want to make sure we leave just some time for questions and answers, and be mindful of time. But before we jump into that, and maybe some last kind of follow-up fun type questions, I was wondering, we're talking to business owners. Some might be just thinking about starting a business. Some might be pretty small right now. Some might be looking for investors right now. But do you have any just good tips? Like, what are your best takeaways for a business that's either looking to grow this year or scale, from your expert advice? You all come from different backgrounds. So is there kind of just one main takeaway that you guys can kind of give to the audience?
Yeah, I would say, if you can't measure it, don't do it. This goes a little bit back to what John just mentioned about understanding your business. You can't grow and scale a business successfully without data. You absolutely, you have to be able to understand, and there's so many tools that you can use out there. Google Data Studios, most of the software that you're using would have, reporting tools. You need to be able to essentially have your own business dashboard. Whether you have a manufacturing company or a retail sales company or a SaaS company, you need a business intelligence dashboard to understand where the business is performing right now, what are the trends, the good trends and the bad trends. You really need to be able to understand what you need to focus on today in your business, because if you have certain things in your business that are performing poorly, you don't want to focus on growing right now. You need to be triaging, something in the business. And it really just depends on what type of business it is. But if I can say, it's so imperative to understand the business, the health of the business. And when it comes, especially so much of growth and scale revolves around marketing, and marketing is so challenging, and you really need to be able to measure anything that you do. If you can't measure it, don't do it, because you don't know if it's going to be successful or not. It's really important to be able to have the analytics in place, whether it's if you have an outbound sales team or a road sales team, or whether you have a retail store, understanding, having a understanding of your inventory and what's selling through, what's not selling through, what you need to just discount and get out there and make, what trends are in the business, and is those trends cyclical? Really understand, and you're not going to get any of that information without data. So in order to grow and scale a business, you need data, and you need to be able to measure anything that you do around marketing. Because if you don't do it, chances are it's going to be very challenging to scale or grow a business if you can't measure and have metrics whereby internally you define what's success and what isn't success.
Thank you. I really like that. I think business owners often get caught up in doing the part of the business that they love, like why they started the business, their passion, and they forget to do the data measuring, or, it can, whether it be keeping track of your income and expenses. We get a lot of that here at the SBDC, where they go back and it's time to file their taxes and they haven't done anything all year. But the data is really important for driving, and knowledge is power, right? So I'm on board with that. John, how about you? Do you have some kind of expert tips for our audience on growing or scaling their business?
Yeah, so my hack, so to speak, would be echoing something that Elias talked about, which is don't have your first, for those folks that are participating in this webinar that want to scale their business and truly want to have a venture-like opportunity and a significant growth, you're going to be seeking investment capital. And so Elias said, don't have your first conversation be about money. And the way that I like to talk to people about it is like, there are so many things your business needs besides money. You need customers, you need vendors, you need talent, employees, you need a board of advisors. All of these things are things investors can help you with besides money. So have conversations around those sorts of things. These high net worth individuals, angel investors, venture capitalists, these are some of the best networked people in the business world, because their success is because of their network. So they can help you with all of these elements. And through that, you're still going to have to tell your story and assert your value proposition and the growth story and the exit opportunity. You're still going to have to do the pitch, but you can build relationships around, getting investors involved in helping you out in some of these other areas. And I've met very few angels, at least here in Pennsylvania, that aren't willing to say, you know what, I know a vendor that can help you with that need. Let me make that introduction. And, these folks are angels because they like dealing with entrepreneurs and they like dealing with businesses, but they don't necessarily want to be stuck in a corner and say, are you going to give me money or not? Having just met you. So I would build those relationships over 6 to 9 months, even longer if possible, and get them involved in your business the other ways. That would be my hack.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you, John. And Mark, do you want to round us out? Do you have any key takeaways from today from the chat, or just go-to tips for our audience on growing their businesses?
I would say that first, you need to understand your customer. You can't grow a business without your customers. And in order to do that, you really need to understand in depth what they value about doing business with you. So in order to provide that value, you have to understand, going back to things that we've discussed already, what benefits they are looking for from your business, whether it is the quality, whether it is the service, even location that you have in your business as far as a benefit to the customer, the personal attitude that they get whenever they walk in. People know their name. That's a great aspect of being a small business, and you know your customers intimately. But you also have to take that benefit into consideration in relation to price. You know, if you're going to be having a lot of higher benefits, then you're going to be charging a higher price to be able to pay for those benefits. And most businesses are more high price, high benefits, which means they're going to be differentiators. So understanding your customers and understanding exactly what they value from your business is going to be important, and being able to provide that value better than your competition. The other thing I would say is that you need to adapt or die. You know, if you don't change your business based on your customers' changes and your customers' preference changes and their changes in the benefits they're seeking, then you're just going to basically either stagnate or just go out of business. So you really need to adapt to those customer changes as they happen.
Yeah, and we saw during the pandemic that entrepreneurs were pivoting left and right. And I think that if we learned anything, it was learning how to adapt. So hopefully entrepreneurs and business owners are learning more flexibility and understanding that it's actually not as hard to change our business models to adapt to the customer needs. We did it during the pandemic, right? So there was one question that came in the chat. We sort of addressed it in our talks. I don't know if the panelists can see it, but basically the question is how to look more appealing to investors in general. And I think we addressed that, but I also think the idea of when would an investor be looking to invest in a company? And this company sounds like, it's not necessarily something an investor would look to invest in. So it sounds like it might be a restaurant, I'm not sure. So what type of companies are businesses or investors investing? Can you kind of clarify that for the audience?
Yeah, I look at, a few things. I look at, the idea, do I feel like it's novel? Do I feel like it can get traction? I look at the entrepreneur and say, does he have the commitment, the skills? Does he have a novel idea? Is there something that do I feel like I can trust him? Do I feel like he has the work ethic and the commitment level that's required? And then when I look at my money, I look at, is there a margin of safety? So if I put my money into, let's say, a convertible note, are there any underlying assets or IP or something in the business whereby if I put $1 in, I can at least get 50, 75% or 100% of my money back? Is there, does the idea have some sort of collateralization? And then very rarely will anybody invest in an idea if they don't believe that there's a minimum 5, but more than likely 10 times on their money opportunity within a 5-year period. And then you have to think about that original stake, about what's the future capital needs of the business? How much dilution do you feel that there'll be? And once you're diluted, is there still opportunity for you to make that 5 to 10 times on your money? And if the entrepreneur and the business model can't produce that, then I'm not going to invest. And chances are most other people wouldn't invest. So, there's also ways that if you do have collateral and you need some growth money, there's people you can do, little debt instruments. You can raise $100,000 at 8% interest, for 2 years and do a private bridge. I do those at time for people, and I might ask for a little bit of warrant coverage or something. So there's lots of different ways to finance your business, but it's going to be really challenging if people don't have a business model that would support a very high multiple of invested capital, especially when it's super risky, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to define that difference. So thank you, Elias. So if anybody has any more questions, attendees either joining us on Zoom or on Facebook, feel free to drop those in. I think we got one that came in the Q&A. Yeah, Sally, I wrote you a message. I've addressed that one. So, but if anybody else on Facebook, you can just write your questions on the comment section. But I did want to kind of ask some fun questions of our panel just to get to know you guys a little bit better. So we'll start with you, Mark. What is your favorite book, or what are you reading right now?
As far as favorite book, I would have to say I'm going to go back about 25 years, and it's Hyper Competition. That's what it's called, by Richard Davini. And it really lays out kind of the ideas I talked about in terms of understanding your customers and what they value in terms of benefits that you're providing to your customers for the price that you're charging your customers. And so you can map out you against your competitors to see who is actually providing the most value to your customers. And I think it's just a really good book in terms of strategy, in terms of thinking about competitors and how you can be better than your competitors. So I would recommend it.
What was the name of it again?
Hyper Competition.
Hyper Competition. All right. Thank you for that one. John, what about you? What are you, what's your favorite book? What are you reading these days?
Well, the best book that I've ever read about entrepreneurship, I listened to it as an audiobook, and it was so good. I went out and bought the book, and it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, who is the lesser known partner of Mark Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz in venture capital. And it's the story of Ben Horowitz's entrepreneurial journey. He founded a couple of companies, had very successful exits, and it is dense with practical advice around the problems and challenges that he faced. So it's an outstanding book and well worth the investment. But it is it's almost a textbook in how dense it is and how it's presented. But he makes it fun too. He's like a rap music aficionado. So every chapter starts out with like lyrics from a rap song, and he seems like a really interesting guy. But that's a great book.
And the name one more time?
It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Okay, yes, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Thank you, John. All right, Elias, what about you? Favorite book? What are you reading these days?
I think a book that I read that was very eye-opening and that I actually embraced and actually applied the methodologies that the book talk about. It's by John Doerr. It's called Measure What Matters, and he was one of the first investors into Google, and it's really a good insight into an OKR, objectives and key results, of how to think about your annual planning, quarterly planning, making sure that your team is focused on the right things that are going to drive the business, being able to set key results, and how do you measure those key results to make sure that you're moving towards your objective, and then has a whole scoring system to determine, how you're progressing towards your thesis. It's a fantastic book, and it's allowed a company like mine that, we're a 40-person company tackling a very large idea. It's given us, hyper focus and the ability to execute on a really large idea, being, essentially understaffed for what we're looking to accomplish. And if you don't mind, I'm going to chime in. I saw Victor's question on there. I just wanted to throw a few ideas out to him. Obviously, I'm not going to have a conversation with him, but he asked about, he's a small business owner. He invested $60,000. He's now got $30,000 in products, $60,000 in equipment, $120,000 productions. He's bootstrapped himself. His shop is small. Trying to get a bigger shop's hard because he needs investment dollars. I would encourage you, Victor, to think a little bit differently about your business. Necessarily having bigger shops, I'm going to assume that it had some sort of retail establishment. We don't have a whole lot of insight, but retail space is really expensive, and a lot of companies expanding their overhead of their business can really put them in a challenging situation. So I would look at a few things. Number one, understanding the products that you're selling. I don't know if you're making them or not. I assume you may be making them because you said 60,000 in equipment. Understanding the margin for that, and maybe instead of expanding your retail footprint, is there a way for you to grow your business online? Could you sell your widget on Amazon, open up an Amazon, reseller account? Can you put it on eBay or Etsy? How are you, instead of having more retail overhead, maybe, it's a lot cheaper to rent a storage locker to keep additional warehouse information instead of like necessarily having, another 1,000 square feet of expensive retail space. So there's a lot of ways that you could maybe think about growing and scaling your business without outside capital. Also, I don't know who the vendors are of where you're buying your raw materials, assuming you're making a product. Once again, I have only a little bit of the picture here. But one of the things that I did to help scale up my device company is I went to my manufacturer and asked for better terms, asked for longer time frames on, maybe he's in a prepay situation and maybe he can move to net 45, right? To free up that cash flow to be able to grow and scale the business faster. So understanding what in your business is what's constraining you, and then how can you move the needle on that through vendors giving you better terms, maybe being a little bit more, opening up new channels of distribution through digital, maybe thinking about, other ways that you could have warehouse inventory without having to necessarily expand your existing retail space. As you guys know, industrial storage space is, 1/20th or 1/10th of what retail space is, right? So, I would encourage Victor to start thinking along those lines, and hopefully something that I threw out there applies to him.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And Victor, I think you might be coming into the Penn State SBDC for consulting. If not, you might want to get with one of us consultants, but we do have some staff members who have worked with selling on Amazon. So definitely we can help if, that's something you want to look into, bringing their whole retail stores onto Amazon. So we have resources to help you figure those things out for sure. I'm going to ask one more question of the panel, and I encourage the audience to drop any questions if they have any questions as we finish up. But I know as entrepreneurs, we certainly are juggling a lot of hats and doing a lot of things. So this is just unrelated to the talk, but do anybody have productivity hacks, things that you do to manage your day? The audience always loves to hear these hacks from our experts. So anybody want to start off?
Yeah, I'll just tell you, I'm really super into this right now. A couple of great books by Cam Newport, A World Without Email, Digital Distractions. Removing digital distractions is so important for your team and productivity. At my startup, there is no Slack communication allowed, no email, no checking your phones between 9 and 12 in the morning. So heads down, deep work, get things done. No meetings allowed. Come in, get yourself set up and tackle a large task uninterrupted. You have to think about, what are you trying to accomplish here? Now, if you're a retail business, you can't say, hey, no customers allowed between these hours, right? It depends on what you're doing, what you're building. But I think about being very disciplined with your team and putting constraints on access to social media. Very few emails need responded to immediately. You could check your email, at noon and at 4 p.m. You don't need to be checking it every 3 minutes that the average American worker does. So, we allow ourselves to be distracted. And the more we're distracted, the less we can concentrate, and the less we can do deep work, important things, and get ourselves. In fact, I'm reading a book right now called Stolen Focus. by Johann Hari. It's on my reading desk right now. And so this is a big thing that I'm trying to learn to do because I'm incredibly busy. And how do I squeeze out more productivity with having 4 kids, being on a bunch of nonprofit boards, building my own company and an investor in 15. It's a 7-day-a-week operation. And so even trying to further discipline myself in, how I manage my social interactions, my professional time, my team, keeping them focused. I would definitely check out Cam Newport. He's got a couple of great TED Talks too out there and a lot of free online tools. Go to YouTube, Google, put his information in YouTube. You'll get a whole bunch of really great productivity hacks. Professor at Georgetown, really super smart guy.
Nice. Thank you. And Elias, just kind of a follow-up question. Since you have employees and you have a staff, do you get your staff to read these books, or are you just kind of reading them and then passing them along? Do you ever do kind of
yeah, it depends. If like the Measure What Matter books, I got halfway in the book and then went on Amazon and bought 10 copies and sent to all my team leads. And we did an internal company book club, and we went through it. And then we said, how do we apply this into our business? Brought in a project manager that we said, okay, we want to adopt these principles into the business, and let's start next quarter. And it's been probably one of the best things I've ever done. So, certain things, everybody's busy in life. So the last thing I want to do is make all my team have a weekly book club meeting, but I can take little bits and say, hey, this is something that I can apply. So one of the things I just said, hey, listen, no Slack time, no meetings between 9 and 12. You all have really hard things you need to get done. And now you got no excuses about being interrupted all the time. Like, get your work done. And if you feel like you're getting your work done, the cadence of the workday, you're going to leave that workday not feeling overwhelmed. You're going to feel like you've accomplished something. And chances are then you're not going to have to work at 8 o'clock at night, because the people that have to work at 8 o'clock at night are typically people that are too distracted and quote unquote busy 9 to 5, 9 to 6 to actually get their work done. And then they got to wait for a quiet period of time to get their work done. So I just told my whole team, listen, as a company, no talking between 9 and noon. Let's get crap done. And it's been good.
And yeah, thank you. I have worked with companies that do book clubs, and I wanted to see if you had actually done that. So thanks for sharing your experience. John, any productivity hacks that you're using or ways that you simplify your day?
Yeah, I think what Elias was saying is really important. And I love the shade on Slack, because I find it incredibly annoying that I turn off all the notifications, because I don't need to know when one person has a thought on a project, every single time. And so I really like the idea of having some focus time. If I'm going to be writing, or I have any really, thinking work, it has to be done in the morning. I typically try any scheduled phone calls or Zooms. I try to do that in the afternoon. When my, interacting with people energizes me. So I like to do that in the afternoon. But one thing that's served me well, Abraham Lincoln actually, to his partner, William Herndon, who was a much younger man. And he, about the concept of investing in tomorrow. Do it now, do it today. And try to get as much done as you can. Don't leave it till tomorrow, because then you're creating a debt for yourself tomorrow. So I'm a believer in lists, get it knocked out, something, do it today. Don't leave it till tomorrow.
That's a good tip as well.
That one quote, tomorrow, the mystical land where all human achievement and opportunity is held.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, Mark, wrap this up. Do you have any tips or hacks for our small businesses that are watching or joining us today?
I would say that small business owners themselves, to help you with productivity, provide autonomy to your employees.
Okay, if you have employees always coming to you and asking, what do I do in this situation? What do you want me to do here? It's just, you're going to get burnout. So you need to allow your employees to make decisions on their own, give them the proper training, but provide autonomy to them so they can make decisions, and give you the time to do what you need to do so that they can, not be running to you for every little thing.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, I want to thank the panel for joining us today. I want to be mindful of kind of wrapping up and getting everybody back to their day, not taking up too much time, as we just mentioned. So thank you to all our guests. You had expert tips and advice. We'll be sharing information about your journeys with our audience, and we thank you for what you offered up today as far as references. So I'm going to share my screen and just give one more opportunity to contact the SBDC if you're looking to kind of start or grow your business, or you're looking to prosper or find those scalable opportunities. Connect with people like John at Ben Franklin if that's the right connection. We offer referrals when appropriate. We can just help guide you in the right direction. So follow us on social media. You can connect with us there, or you can connect with us on our website. So you can find us at sbdc.psu.edu. You can email us and get set up for a no-cost consultation appointment. And we're doing mostly still remote work, but we do have some in-person opportunities as well. So I want to thank the audience for joining us today. We have some more training events and opportunities to work with us in the future. So check those out on our website. And thank you again to Mark, Elias, and John. We really appreciate your contributions to the panel today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.